I'm talking to Ashley Smith of the International Socialist Organization, also a writer for the International Socialist Review and socialistworker.org. We're here at the New England United Conference in Boston, Massachusetts, where 300 people showed up talking about rebuilding the anti-war movement. Ashley's been active in Haitian solidarity issues since the early 90s, and we're going to talk to him about what's going on in Haiti right now. The first thing I need to ask you is, what is the situation on the ground in Haiti, and what is the U.S. role in either making that situation better or worse for the Haitians?
I think that the reality right now in Haiti is it's a total catastrophe, both a natural disaster and a social catastrophe. The natural disaster, as everybody knows, the earthquake has killed probably immediately, with all the buildings that collapsed on people, well over 200,000 people. But the social disaster is really the result of decades and hundreds of years of imperial policies towards Haiti. And that really is what's led to the earthquake being such a killing natural disaster, is the social history of the country. That is, that it was a slave colony, and that the people who were the slaves in Saint Domingue, the French colony, were brutally exploited. And then when it was free, it was shackled with debt. And then the U.S. supported dictatorships that imposed IMF and World Bank loans on the country and forced the economy to be essentially a sweatshop economy. And so all that history meant that the economy was the people were desperately poor. The government, which had been undermined by the U.S., was unable to manage the situation. And so now we have a natural disaster that's turned into a complete social disaster, with now tens of thousands of people dying because there's no aid getting there. And that's really the crime that the U.S. is committing. And it's very different from what we see on the mainstream media. The mainstream media talks about the relief operation, getting aid there and getting food and water and medical supplies to the people who need them. And actually, that's not what's happening in Haiti. The U.S. and the UN have failed miserably to deliver aid.
The most visible face of the international aid effort here in Port-au-Prince. Most Haitians here have seen little humanitarian aid so far. What they have seen is guns, and lots of them. Armoured personnel carriers cruise the streets. UN soldiers aren't here to help pull people out of the rubble. They're here, they say, to enforce the law. This is what much of the UN presence actually looks like on the streets of Port-au-Prince. Men in uniform, racing around in vehicles, carrying guns.
The U.S. initial response was a military security type response, and actually Robert Gates, the defense secretary, said that airlifted supplies into Haiti to address the crisis would cause riots, and so he was opposed to doing airlifts to drop aid. And so as a result, people languished for days, not getting any kind of aid. And in fact, the U.S. blocked several planes when it took control of the airport. Planes from CARICOM, the Caribbean Community, planes from France, Doctors Without Borders, and several other countries were denied entry into Haiti's airport to deliver food supplies because the U.S. was privileging a military deployment. And so now we're in a situation where the U.S. has, in the process of deploying 20,000 troops, 10,000 that are probably going to be on the ground in Haiti in a military occupation, and 10,000 more troops that are going to be a part of a Coast Guard and U.S. naval blockade that's going to surround the country to repatriate people fleeing this desperate circumstance. So really, in the guise of providing humanitarian aid, the U.S. is engaged in a full-scale military occupation, and it's not meeting the needs, the desperate needs of the Haitian population in Port-au-Prince and some of the other cities surrounding Port-au-Prince, which was right at the heart, really, of the devastating earthquake. So I think it's a time for people to start making demands of the U.S. government that real aid and relief should be provided, and that it should not be a military reoccupation of the country. There's an outpouring of generosity from the people of the world towards the people of Haiti, who are the victims of this terrible disaster. And all the best instincts, I think, have come out from the majority of the population. But the governments of the world have been, frankly, very stingy. The U.S. has only offered $100 million in aid. The European, which sounds a lot, but it's actually Powerball money. It's chump change when you think about what the bankers got in bailouts. And some other countries have been much more generous per capita, in fact. Cuba, Venezuela, China. and the European Union has already promised $500 million. So they've been much more generous. What people have been doing out of their generosity is giving to international non-governmental organizations to try and help with the relief effort. And my feeling is that a lot of that money is probably not going to get to the ground in Haiti. It's not going to go to Haitians who actually to build up their own organizations to deal with this crisis. So there was just an AP story that came out a couple of days ago that was about what U.S. aid contributions is going to go to, and they said that only 1 cent out of every dollar that's being sent to Haiti will actually go to the Haitian government, which means that they're going to probably U.S. and other countries and international non-governmental organizations to provide the aid. And actually a third of the dollar, 33 cents of the dollar, is going to go to the U.S. military. And the problem with that is that it's failing to build up Haitians' own institutions, their governments, their own grassroots organizations, and that's going to be a pivotal part of Haitians reclaiming their sovereignty against what's a full-scale military occupation. And that raises a question that I think is troubling about the role of international NGOs. International NGOs in Haiti are a major force. There are 10,000 NGOs that are currently in the country. It's one of the largest concentrations of NGOs anywhere in the world, and they've been there, frankly, for decades, and the conditions for the majority of Haitians have gotten worse while the NGOs have been there. And so I have a quite critical attitude towards the international NGOs. Not all of them. I think there's a difference between some of the big star NGOs and the real grassroots NGOs. Not all of them are the same, but the big, star NGOs don't build up the Haitian organizations, don't build up the sovereignty of the Haitian people, and in fact contribute to undermining it. And a lot of the money that's contributed to these organizations is not destined for Haiti. And The Lancet, a British medical journal, just came out with a study of the behavior of the international NGOs, and they actually said that there's an extreme amount of competition between the international NGOs for photo ops so that they can get the bulk of the aid. And so the competition between the NGOs is actually impeding the relief delivery because it's shaped by where the cameras are. And not only that, a lot of the money that people donate to the international NGOs goes to a giant bureaucracy. For example, the Red Cross has a huge bureaucracy, executives paid with enormous sums of money, and many operations all around the world. So a lot of the money that's going to the Red Cross may end up elsewhere, and that goes for many other international NGOs. So what I have advocated, and a lot of other Haitian solidarity activists and Haitians themselves have advocated, that people should send their money and their volunteer aid to actual grassroots Haitian organizations that are on the ground. They're doing a lot of the work to address the crisis, and it's going to be the route through which Haitians themselves are going to rebuild their society. And that's who we should give our money to, and that's who we should express our solidarity with.
The National Nurses Union made an incredible solidarity gesture, and it's not just a gesture. I saw Michael Moore interviewed on Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. The head of the Nurses Union called him and said, "We can't get through to Obama. Can you help us?" They thought somehow Moore had an in with Obama. "Can you help us? We got 11,000 nurses who want to go down there. One nurse can care for 300 people. That would make such a huge dent in the suffering." Of course, he was willing to try to help. He said, "Yeah, I don't have any in with Obama either. I can't get to him either." We need to hear about those type of solidarity actions. We also need to hear what we need to demand of our government.
I think that what the National Nurses Union has done is exactly what people should be doing. Is a lot of the grassroots organizations in the United States that have the capacity to organize should be imitating their idea. Essentially, what they did is they called a conference call right after the earthquake hit, and over 1,800 nurses got on the conference call and said they were willing to volunteer. And then since then, 10,000 more nurses have volunteered, and the number is going up. And initially, it looked like the U.S. military was going to accept the volunteers from the nurses to get onto the ships, to go into Port-au-Prince, to help in the hospitals, and that would immediately make an enormous difference. But I think the Obama administration is so obsessed with a military policy instead of a relief policy that they have basically sidelined that initiative from the National Nurses Union. So they've been trying to contact Obama, and Obama and the military personnel has said, no, we don't need the nurses. We've got enough military personnel to handle the situation, which is flat out untrue, because the majority of people in the hospitals don't have enough nurses, don't have enough doctors, don't have anesthesia, don't have electricity, don't have running water. They need precisely what the National Nurses Union could provide, a lot of expertise to help with, you know, the hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands and probably hundreds of thousands of people that are in desperate need of not only medical care but psychological care and all sorts of other things. I think that we're in a situation where the U.S. is impeding the relief operation, and that means that we have to make several political demands. So I disagree with Jon Stewart when he said on Comedy Central that now is not the time for politics, now is the time for providing aid and money, et cetera. I think it's the time to do both. And the political angle of it is very important, because we have to make demands of our government, because the U.S. government is not doing the right thing right now. So I think the demands are essentially 4 or 5-fold. First, we should oppose the militarization of the aid operation. There's no need for a massive military deployment of 20,000 soldiers to Haiti. Instead of guns, we should argue for aid, relief, food, water, medical supplies that will actually address people's needs. The Haitian people are not a violent, anarchic, looting threat to anyone. So first, we should oppose the militarization and the reoccupation of Haiti. Second, I think we have to demand that Haitians' right to self-determination be respected, and that includes having the Haitian government in control of what's going on, so that there's some modicum of democratic accountability for what's happening to the country. And as part of that, we should demand that Jean-Bertrand Aristide, the president that the U.S. kidnapped and when it backed a coup in 2004, should be allowed to return, and his party, Famille Lavala, should be allowed to participate in elections, again, so that Haitians can control their own society. And then I think the third demand, which is extremely important, is that right now the U.S. is surrounding the country with a flotilla of military ships to prevent refugees from fleeing the island, and Janet Napolitano and Hillary Clinton have both said that any Haitians who flee the country because of the disaster will be repatriated. I think we have to flatly reject that and welcome any refugees that want to leave the country and provide them with the best possible conditions. Right now, the U.S. has cleared space at Guantanamo and Crome Detention Center in South Florida to jail people who flee the island if they're not able to repatriate them by the military flotilla. So we have to let the refugees in and welcome them and provide all the services that they need. And the final demand, I think, is the one that I was talking about earlier, which is that we should give money to Haitian organizations so that the Haitian grassroots movement can rebuild itself, can address the crisis. And that's fundamental respect for the Haitians' rights and the Haitians' people's ability to remake their society so that they can build the kind of future that they want. And the final demand is that we have to oppose the new economic plan that the U.S. government and the United Nations are planning for Haiti. Haitians have long protested the sweatshop development plans that the U.S. has had for the country. And right now, amidst this crisis, Bill Clinton, who's the UN Special Envoy, as well as the Obama administration, are backing the same old plan that the Haitians opposed in the 1980s, which they called the Plan of Death. That is a plan of export-oriented agriculture, particularly of mangoes, which will not make the country food self-sufficient, which is a desperate need. And the second thing they're proposing is to build giant new sweatshops to take advantage of the desperately poor Haitian laboring population for U.S. multinationals and other multinationals. And the final thing is to open, like the U.S. has done throughout the Caribbean, the country to tourism. And none of those things really are about self-sufficient development and increasing the viability of the agricultural system within Haiti and meeting the needs of the Haitian urban poor with living wages. So I think we have to oppose the new neoliberal shock doctrine plan that the U.S. is imposing on the country in the midst of this catastrophe. On Tuesday, it will be 3 weeks since the earthquake has struck. And this is a horrific natural disaster The estimates vary widely about how many people have been killed, but probably it's safe to say that as many as 200,000, probably the number is going to increase as we find out, both who was killed by the earthquake and who's dying now because of the slow delivery of aid, which I'll talk about. There are 1.5 million people who are currently homeless in Port-au-Prince and some of the other smaller surrounding cities in the area. There will be 2 million people dependent on international aid for food, water, clothing, shelter, all the way into December of this year. That's a UN estimate. So 2 million people are going to be dependent on aid. There are estimates right now that 3.5 million people are dependent on relief just to survive because of the wreckage that's been done to Port-au-Prince and the surrounding cities' infrastructure. People know, probably around 60% of the buildings in Port-au-Prince have been leveled, including the seat of government. In some of the other towns like Jacmel and Léogâne, up to 80 or 90% of the buildings have been flattened. And we've seen a lot of images in the mainstream media about the incredible response, so-called, by the U.S. government, by many other governments around the world, and by international relief organizations. And I just want to say that really, that is a lot of media propaganda, because the reality is the UN said, I think it was 2 days ago, that they had only managed to feed 500,000 people when over 3 million people are dependent on relief aid just to feed themselves and get water. But I want to also take on several myths that have also been propagated. Myth number one, I think, is that this was purely a natural disaster, which I think doesn't explain why the earthquake was such a killer as a phenomenon. And it was really a killer because of poverty in Haiti, the lack of government regulations, the lack of government infrastructure. And those are not natural disasters. You have to ask the question, why is Haiti such a poor country? Why do over 70% of the population survive on under $2 a day? Why is there no building regulation in the city of Port-au-Prince that sits on a fault line? Why are the buildings themselves, even before the earthquake, 60% of them were a faulty construction and even falling down before the earthquake struck? Why is that the case? And to really understand that, you have to go through the history of the development of Haiti as a nation state, that it was the richest slave colony in the world, and hundreds of thousands of black African slaves were taken, and it proved to be the most profitable colony in the New World after it was founded by the French and called Saint-Domingue. And there was a tremendous revolution that happened when the slaves, after the French Revolution started, when slaves rose up and won a heroic victory, the first successful slave revolution in human history, founded the first free, democratic, independent black republic in the New World, and it was led by Toussaint Louverture, the great national hero of Haiti. The response by the world powers at that time was to try and strangle Haiti to death, because it was a tremendous threat in the New World, which was entirely composed of plantation slavery. When you look at the economic structures of that epoch and that area in the New World. So France, when it recognized Haiti's independence finally in 1824, said, you have to repay us for the loss of our property. That is what the French former slave masters said. And so Haiti was shackled at birth with $21 billion in today's terms in debt that it had to repay to France all the way up to 1947. So the country was founded in debt peonage as a result of the French Empire. And then the U.S. took over, really, for a long period of time, and even exacerbated more dramatically the horrible conditions in Haiti. They invaded and occupied the country several times after the U.S. became an imperial power through the Spanish-American War. They invaded and occupied the country from 1915 to 1934 and established the institutions that would be the bane of Haiti's existence. The Haitian National Army, which was never a foreign army. It was never meant to invade and occupy other countries. It was designed by the United States to repress the people of Haiti. While the U.S. was there, it imposed corvée labor, that is a form of slave labor, to do a lot of the construction projects. And the U.S. was not done when it left the country in 1934. It backed the Duvalier dictatorship, one of the most disgusting reactionary regimes that you can find. But like many disgusting reactionary regimes, the U.S. looked on the Duvalier dictatorship of father Papa Doc and son Baby Doc as a key ally in the anti-communist program against Cuba. And so the U.S. backed the Duvalier dictatorship as a counterweight. And particularly under Baby Doc's regime in the 1970s and 1980s, the U.S. imposed what Haitians call a plan of death on the Haitian economy. That is a neoliberal structural adjustment program of forcing opening up of the Haitian economy to U.S. agribusiness, which flooded the countryside with rice and other agricultural products that undercut peasant agriculture, and the U.S. drove all that population into the city of Port-au-Prince. So Port-au-Prince was a city of 50,000 in the 1950s. As we know, it's close to 3 million people today, and that's a direct result of U.S. economic policy. But like the whole history of Haiti, wherever there's oppression, there is resistance, and the Haitian people rose up in the 1980s and built a movement called Lavalas that toppled the dictatorship of Baby Doc Duvalier, who the U.S. took to retirement on the French Riviera, along with hundreds of millions of dollars of stolen money that the Haitian population has been paying back really since Baby Doc was driven from the country. And it established the first free, open, and democratic elections. Finally, the movement won in 1990 that brought the pivotal leader of the Lavalas movement, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, to power. He won two-thirds of the vote in an election with 14 candidates in which the U.S. backed in 1990. Guess what? A World Bank former employee, Marc Bazin, who got hardly any votes, because who wanted to vote for the World Bank doing anything more in Haiti? But from the very beginning, the U.S. was very angry about having somebody who was in the form of Aristide against neoliberalism, against U.S. imperialism, denounced the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank as a gang of thieves. This was a problem for the U.S. and what it was trying to impose through all of Latin America and the Caribbean. So the Bush administration, Bush the first, backed a coup that toppled Aristide from power in 1991, only 8 months into Aristide's term as president of Haiti. And it imposed the leakiest set of sanctions on Haiti that you can possibly imagine, because they tacitly supported the coup regime that proceeded to massacre thousands of Lavalas activists to try and push back this tremendous movement against neoliberalism. Aristide gets returned to Haiti in 1994 after there's a movement internationally against what both Bush and Clinton were doing with Haitian refugees from this horrible coup regime. Thousands upon thousands of Haitians fled the island, and guess what Bush and Clinton did? He jailed them. Both of them jailed them on Guantanamo Bay and in Chrome Detention Center in Florida. After that became so untenable, the U.S. returned Aristide to power on the condition that he accept the American plan of death in Haiti, structural adjustment. Aristide was somewhat boxed in. He made some compromises, and especially the subsequent president, Preval, agreed and implemented much of the neoliberal privatization in the latter half of the 1990s. Aristide wins another election in 2000 and says, not only do we need to raise the minimum wage, a big threat to the sweatshop industry that the U.S. was trying to back in Haiti, but also demanded $21 billion in reparations from France for the original debt that France imposed on Haiti to recognize its independence in 1824. And so, yet again, the U.S., France, and Canada backed another coup in 2004 that toppled Aristide, and the U.S. kidnapped Aristide and took him to the Central African Republic and now into exile in South Africa. And the coup regime that the Bush administration, the Bush II administration backed, proceeded to massacre another thousands of Lavalas activists and that tried to disorganize the popular movement. So when you understand that history of imperialism, you understand why the poverty happened, why the lack of a Haitian state that could manage the situation, why there was no building regulation, and hence why the earthquake was such a killing force when it struck Port-au-Prince. So it's a myth that it's a natural disaster. It also is an unnatural disaster, a direct result of empire and conquest in the Caribbean, and in particular the United States. The second myth that I want to go over is the idea that the U.S. is delivering aid. This is a profound myth. If you watched Obama's State of the Union address, he claimed that Haitians were dancing in the street chanting USA, 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 which could not be further from the truth. Unlike Bush, Obama said the right things. about Haiti. Bush, we know from Katrina, basically let New Orleans get washed out to sea and only said what we need to do is deploy Blackwater, the U.S. National Guard, to police those crazy black people who are getting out of control. Obama at least said the right things, that they're brothers and sisters, we need to provide aid, we will stand by people. But Obama's gap between words and deeds could not be wider than anybody could possibly imagine. Immediately, China sent a plane load of aid from all the way around the country. Cuba immediately deployed dozens of doctors when they already had 500 doctors on the ground without any security service. These were unsecured aid missions. Iceland, for God's sake, which had just went through an economic catastrophe, they sent a plane load of aid. The U.S. was the last on the scene, and when it got on the scene, what it did was focus immediately on the militarization of the aid operation. So the U.S. right now, instead of delivering aid, is engaged in a full-scale occupation of the country. 10,000 U.S. troops are going to be deployed on the island itself, in the country of Haiti. And Hillary Clinton, as Danny was talking about, flew to Port-au-Prince to do a photo op with the President Preval, in which she got Preval to issue a decree basically granting dictatorial powers to the Haitian government, which Hillary Clinton said that was all delegated to us. So the U.S. is essentially, under the guise of a humanitarian mission, engaged in a military reoccupation of the country, and that has proceeded to interfere with the delivery of aid. So when the U.S. seized the airport, one of the first impacts that they had was to divert aid missions from other countries. They diverted a plane from the Caribbean community that was going to deliver food and water and medical aid. They diverted a plane from Doctors Without Borders. They diverted a plane from Mexico and several others. In fact, when Danny said it, but this bears repeating, when Hillary Clinton went in for a photo op, the entire Haitian airport was closed down for 3 hours while they secured the airport so that she could fly in safely to get dictatorial powers and then fly out of the country. And the planes that the U.S. has been allowing in are disproportionately military planes. And two weekends ago, at the key moment when the most aid needed to get there, because you need to get aid in 48 hours to deal with this kind of crisis, the U.S. was allowing 200 military flights 2 weekends ago on Saturday, and only 60 aid flights were coming in on that weekend, two weekends ago. And Al Jazeera ran an incredible video where an Al Jazeera reporter was going through with a UN convoy through Port-au-Prince and described what the UN and U.S. troops are actually doing on the ground. This is how Al Jazeera described it. Most Haitians here have seen little humanitarian aid so far. What they have seen is guns, and lots of them. Armored personnel carriers cruise the streets. UN soldiers aren't here to pull up people out of the rubble. They're here, they say, to enforce the law. This is what much of the UN presence actually looks like on the grounds, on the streets of Port-au-Prince. Men in uniform racing around in vehicles carrying guns. At the entrance to the city's airport, where most of the aid is coming in, there is anger and frustration. Much needed supplies of water and food are inside, and Haitians are locked out. That's the reality of the humanitarian mission that the U.S. is supposedly conducting. They're privileging policing over meeting people's needs. And the worst thing is what Danny just said, the fact that there are actually tens of thousands of people who are suffering medical conditions that the horribly depleted hospitals can't meet. These are hospitals that are without anesthesia, without electricity, without food and water. And people, if you watch Democracy Now!, Evan Leon, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, he talked about sending doctors out to hardware stores if they weren't wrecked to get hacksaws to do surgery. I mean, these are the conditions that the people are in. And in those conditions, the U.S. is not allowing a plane load of people who need medical attention get out of the country because they're concerned about who's going to pay for it. I mean, this is an insane situation. And there was an amazing article that captured the whole situation in, of all places, the Wall Street Journal by 3 medical doctors who are all from New York City. And they called Haiti Obama's Katrina. This is not, nobody's talking about it this way. But in reality, the same stuff that was done by Bush in New Orleans is being done in a whole country in Haiti right now. And they go through the conditions that I described in the hospitals, and then they describe what they saw when they went to the airport under U.S. control. Later, as we were leaving Haiti, we were appalled to see warehouse-sized quantities of unused medicines, food, and other supplies at the airport, surrounded by hundreds of U.S. and international soldiers standing around aimlessly. That was the Wall Street Journal, Tuesday the 26th, so earlier this week. And the third myth that they're using to justify this approach, which, if you know anything about Haiti, is a history of racism by the world system against Haitians for the original revolution and for the opposition to neoliberalism and tons of other reasons. And the stories have been frankly repulsive, of looting, of violence, of anarchic black people running around the streets of Port-au-Prince. They've taken a handful of totally isolated examples and whipped them up into a panic as if every aid operation needs security. It's completely untrue. Most of the people providing aid, from NGOs, et cetera, have no security detail, and they're not being affected. And the whole idea of criticizing people for looting, we have to throw out the window. It's disgusting. People are poor, they're desperate. I support them getting the food if it's in a store. I support them getting the water. What would you do if you were in those circumstances? You would go and you would be called a looter. That we should not use that word about Haitians who are in these desperate circumstances. And the other thing is why, of course, if you don't provide aid, there's going to be instability. I mean, scarcity is what's going to create the problem. So the U.S. is creating the problem by this obsession with security, and the U.S. is impeding the aid. So it's stoking up the entire problem. So what's the real goal with what the U.S. is doing with this militarization of the whole aid operation? And I think we have to turn to the Heritage Foundation to really get an answer. I don't know if people saw it, but the Heritage Foundation, the day after the earthquake, on Wednesday, the day after the earthquake, put up something on their website that was so embarrassing that they immediately struck from their website. But, you know, it was a Freudian slip. They told the truth. And they're not exactly friends with the Obama administration. They're sort of like the political unconscious of the Obama administration. This is what the Heritage Foundation said in an article entitled, "Amidst the Suffering, Crisis in Haiti Offers Opportunities to the United States." In addition to providing immediate humanitarian assistance, the U.S. response to the tragic earthquake in Haiti offers opportunities to reshape Haiti's long dysfunctional government and economy, as well as to improve the public image of the United States in the region. While on the ground in Haiti, the U.S. military can also interrupt the nightly flights of cocaine to Haiti and the Dominican Republic from the Venezuelan coast and counter the ongoing efforts, this is an insane statement, of Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez to destabilize the island of Hispaniola. This U.S. military presence, which should also include a large contingent of U.S. Coast Guard assets, can also prevent any large-scale movement by Haitians to take to the sea in rickety watercraft to try and enter the United States illegally. Meanwhile, the U.S. must be prepared to insist that the Haitian government work closely with the U.S. to ensure that corruption does not infect the humanitarian assistance flowing to Haiti. Long-term reforms for Haitian democracy and its economy are also badly overdue. This is the shock doctrine on steroids, to be honest. You know, what Naomi Klein calls the shock doctrine. So just a bullet point what the U.S. is really up to. Point number one, why the U.S. cares. They don't really care, to be honest, about the humanitarian catastrophe. The main thing that they want to get people to do is support the idea that the U.S. Army can do good in the world. After the damage done, okay, I'm wrapping up. Yeah, I am wrapping up. They have to rehumanize the U.S. military because Iraq and Afghanistan had so profoundly discredited it. So they have to do that. If you ask any soldier, are you trained to deliver relief? They will laugh at you. Basic training is about learning how to kill people. Another idea that people came up with is take all of Royal Caribbean's cruise ships, dock them in Port-au-Prince, house Haitians in fancy luxury, and feed the people. The final thing is we have to donate to organizations that are going to rebuild the grassroots movement in Haiti, because the U.S. has a plan, this Collier plan, and there's a long history of resistance in Haiti, and we have to support the grassroots organizations, both to do mutual relief in these desperate circumstances of the kind that Josue is organizing, so that a new resistance movement against the U.S. and UN plan in Haiti can be built. The Haitians have tremendous resilience. They're a proud people founded on a glorious revolution, and Haiti will rise up, and we have to stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity with that movement.